person in the league to talk about outside of Colin Kaepernick for all the obvious reasons, right? But there have been some coaching hires in college football. Today, Oregon announced that they are hiring Willie Taggart from the University of Southern Florida. So that's a pretty interesting hire, and I'll give you my thoughts on that. Didn't get too much into Matt Rule and Baylor yesterday. The coaching carousel continues in college football, round and round. Where does it go? Where it winds up, nobody knows. And I think that people are fairly interested about what happens to Lane Kiffin, at least around here. Right, like if you are following Alabama at all, and that is the big. I mean, that everybody's following Alabama. I feel like you have to. They're that good. If you're following Alabama at all, then I think you are at least a little bit curious as to the landing spot of one Lane Kiffin. Because if he's not staying at Alabama, where does he go? If he stays and keeps that lateral move and he joins Ed Orgeron and he's the offensive coordinator for LSU on a scale of 1 to nuclear, how upset is Nick Saban? How upset is Nick Saban? He doesn't strike me as a particular guy that's going to like that. So he's come out and said that a number of ways. And like all of this coaching hire stuff has got me thinking, because, I mean, it's going to be difficult for Lane Kiffin to find a job in large part because of all the hires that are being made. You've got Matt Rule at Baylor. You've got Willie Taggart at Oregon. PJ Fleck is on the move. So you've just got a lot of people, and those names are being tossed around. And it just kind of goes to show the college football. The reason why coaches get paid as much money as coaches get paid is because it's very important in college football to get a coach right. Like, that's the most important thing. It's not necessarily the most important thing in the NFL, oddly enough. Like, a bad coach can be covered up by great players, especially a great quarterback. A great quarterback can help a bad coach survive presumably much longer than he should. And if you look at the NBA, it doesn't matter if you're Mike Brown. If you've got LeBron James, you're going to look like a good basketball coach, even if you are, in fact, not a good basketball coach. And so college football, to me, is very interesting. And college basketball, too, because when you get great players, it doesn't necessarily mean anything if you don't have a great coach, which is why these guys get paid as much money as they wind up getting paid. So I go with all of that to say that brings us back to our conversation about Butch Jones. Because I look at a guy like Charlie Strong and go, okay, he's a good coach, and things didn't work out at Texas. And I don't think that anybody is going, well, that didn't work out because Charlie Strong's not a good coach. Sometimes you just have to get the best fit for you. So we'll talk about all of those things. But first, let me tell you about where you can reach us on the net. Are they still calling it that? The net? On the net, you can find us at hotnewstalkradio.com on our Facebook page and our Twitter and our YouTube. If you search Hot News Talk Radio, you'll find us. We stream all of our local shows every single day. So this show and the David Tulis show, you can check all of those things out if you don't get the opportunity to tune in to Clutch with Keon Rose from 6 to 8. But I highly recommend that you go ahead and do that just for your own knowledge and fun. Also, make sure to check us out on our website, noogaradio.com, and, of course, the TuneIn Radio app, which is free in whatever mobile store that you use. That is the TuneIn Radio app. Give us a favorite and press play, and you'll have Nooga Radio everywhere you go. So, yeah, I'm a Texas fan. So, like Charlie Strong, when I watched what was happening at Texas, I just did not feel like anybody was going to ever be successful there. And in a way that I'm actually somewhat concerned about Tom Herman, because the level of dysfunction at Texas is in large part because the boosters have so much say in what goes on. And the athletic director wasn't particularly strong. And so you get to a guy like a Charlie Strong, and he's just kind of over his head from the beginning, right? Like, if you're not coming out of Texas and you're not winning immediately right out of the gate, you are somewhat in over your head from the absolute beginning. So he comes in, they're not winning out the gate because they're bad. They've been recruited poorly by Mac Brown before on his way out the door. And he shows up and he's just kind of like basically struggling for life from the very beginning. And part of it it wasn't a great fit, right? Like, He just was not the guy that the boosters were necessarily looking for. They weren't going to give him the time to try and straighten this thing out. I think that he needed more time than what he got. You know, I mean, look, 4 years feels like a lot of time, and some guys can show up and instantly start winning with a team that wasn't winning before. But that Texas team, you weren't going to be winning with that. And as things got more out of hand and more dysfunctional, I feel like that leaks into the team. It leaks into the way the players are playing, and guys pick up on it, and they just don't play well. And so, yeah, no, I feel like it is a little bit of a sour grapes defense of Charlie Strong, but that just goes to say how important this stuff is. If you are trying to hire a head coach, you've got to get it right. You have got to get that correct. It's not up for debate. You can be very wrong on that. You get a guy that doesn't fit, not even a bad coach, just a guy that doesn't fit, you don't have success. And I say that because around this time of year, about 4 years ago, as you all know, Butch Jones came here. And Butch Jones was one of those hires, like a Charlie Strong from Louisville, like a Willie Taggart from USF, like a Matt Rule from Temple, where you got a guy who's coming from a smaller program, but he's got all of the accolades behind him. He's got people saying, like, this guy's going to be a really good coach. And so you've just got a lot to be hopeful for, really. And at the time, it felt like a good hire. And I still don't think that the Butch Jones hire was a bad hire. Right? Like, I just don't think that there was anything particularly wrong with that hire. But at the same time, there haven't been enough things particularly right with it as well, because you've got Butch Jones, who is a guy that does not understand how to play the media. Okay, for instance, right? I've been watching Luke Cage on Netflix with my girlfriend, and one of the bad guys in the show has multiple encounters with the media and basically continues to end up, for like the first half of the season, just ends up looking foolish and stupid repeatedly over and over and over again as a result of the fact that she can somehow not handle herself in the media. And that's just an obvious fact. If you don't know how to handle yourself in the media, you will be skewered and lampooned for all of eternity. And nothing says that more than the Champions of Life quote from Butch Jones, which I understand actually where Butch Jones was coming from on that one when he said that. At the same time, that's not what people want to hear, right? And you just have to have the self-awareness and the awareness of your fan base to go, okay, they know. Like, they don't want to hear this. They want to hear you take ownership of the stuff that you've done, the mistakes that you've made, what went wrong. Be straight up and honest with us, because we've been watching the college football season this entire season. We have eyes, and something's not working. And it's not just for the love of the game, right? It's not just because the guys didn't want it enough, right? And I don't care that they're always going to be champions in your eyes. We want to know why they didn't end up actually winning the SEC East and becoming SEC East actual champions. And his lack of awareness surrounding all of that is what's making Butch Jones feel like probably not the best fit for a school like Tennessee, or a school that's like a historically powerful school. Like, you're not gonna, that's not gonna fly at Tennessee. It might maybe fly at Tennessee Tech. It's not gonna fly at Tennessee, right? Like, what flies at Kennesaw State is not gonna fly at UGA. So this lack of awareness surrounding that, like, I've actually paid more attention to when coaches make comments now as a result of having had covered Butch Jones for as long as I have had to cover Butch Jones, which is basically my entire time on radio. Having to deal with that, I pay more attention to the awareness that coaches have when they say certain things. And more often than not, coaches will try and own on some level, maybe not entirely, but on some level, what it is that they did or did not do. Like, even Nick Saban will do that, even though, like, you know, you ask him the wrong question, he's tearing you to pieces. He'll do it. And Butch Jones simply will not do it. Nothing is ever his fault. Nothing is ever wrong. He never takes ownership of what Butch Jones could have done better to make those around him better. And it's crazy because I feel like only locally is Butch Jones really getting a lot of flack for that. Like, you know, the internet made fun of Butch Jones, and locally we'll make fun of Butch Jones and we'll talk about it. But like nationally, he has not caught the flack for that anybody else would have at any other program. I don't think that if you had a coach that did not take ownership of his actions and nothing he ever did was wrong, I mean, nationally, you'd be ripping him to pieces, right? Like that, and it would be fair because that's in your job description. That is part of what you do is you shield your players from criticism, right? Butch Jones feels like he's more than willing to take guys and just let them roll under the bus for it. Which, I don't know, that just seems weird to me. That seems weird. You're listening to Nooga Radio, Clutch with Keon Rose on AM 1240 and NoogaRadio.com. I don't know if this is just like Butch Jones was just not a great fit, or if he is just missing some fixable problems. Like, right, like if you can get Butch Jones to be better with the media, but I don't know that you can, because as crazy as this sounds, the things that Butch Jones says and the things that Butch Jones does, it sounds as though he sincerely believes everything that he's saying. It sounds as though Butch Jones sincerely believes everything that he says, every corny, hokey thing that he says, every cliche that parades out of his mouth one after the other, like some kind of army of green indiscriminate soldiers where you can't tell one from the other. Like, that's a Butch Jones quote. You could take a Butch Jones quote from last year. If I played a Butch Jones quote from last year and said, okay, this is what Butch Jones said after the Georgia game, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. You wouldn't know that came from last year. Like, if you just mixed and matched Butch Jones quotes to different games, because he speaks in cliches all the time. All the time. So this coaching thing, you've got to get right. And it feels like, not unlike drafting a quarterback in the NFL, it's almost impossible to get right. Like, you just do your best, but you know that, like, down the road, 3 or 4 years from now, like, some of these guys are just not going to be there. So which guys are the real guys? Which guys are the pretenders? Which guys are the contenders? Well, for starters, I like Willie Taggart at Oregon. I do, because of his charisma, mostly. Being able to recruit is a huge part of college football. But Oregon has really struggled recruiting lately. That is why you're seeing them decline, right? Like the Chip Kelly days, there was a lot of things that went right with the recruiting. They had the uniforms that were cool, and they changed them every year. They were scoring 1 million points. The spread offense was not new, but certainly taking national prominence, and Oregon was kind of leading that charge nationally in terms of stuff you saw on TV. And it was flashy, and the Oregon Duck was doing a number of push-ups for every point that they scored in the game, and they were scoring like 60, 70 points a game. That stuff made it very easy to recruit at Oregon. And now Oregon is kind of like back at the beginning again. Like, you just have to start over. You do have the Nike endorsement. You're not zero. You're not going all the way back to zero. But neither are you starting from where you should have been starting from, which is like if you had hired a guy like a Willie Taggart after Mariota left, I feel like Oregon is not in the dire straits that it is in at this particular juncture. Right? So you get Willie Taggart. He is known to be a very good recruiter. He got multiple 10-win seasons from USF, which is kind of difficult to do. Also, USF points, bro, points. The University of Southern Florida can score a lot of points. I mean, crazy points. The 50, 60 kind of points. So, yeah, if you have a defense that is porous enough, they will nail you to the wall. And that kind of excitement offensively, if you give a guy like Willie Taggart more talent, imagine what more kind of damage he could do, especially offensively. Because here's the thing. I don't think that an offense is necessarily more or less exciting than another offense unless that offense scores a lot of points. That's an exciting offense, right? So even if you were running on every play, or you just ran the triple option, if you were scoring often, that's exciting. you could run the spread and be boring if you're not getting in the end zone. The Willie Taggart teams can get into the end zone. So now the issue becomes, what happens if you allow this guy to recruit more fully, give him more talent? Because Oregon is a school that can be recruited to, right? Albeit that when they're not good, they are recruiting from Oregon. That's the only state they pull from. When they're good, they get to leak out into Cali. They get to leak out into the neighboring states in that area. When they're bad, it's just Oregon. That's it. That's it. So, yeah. And also another thing about the Willie Taggart hire, because Oregon is a state that has you interview a minority candidate before you interview anybody else, it is a kind of Rooney Rule-esque hire. And the thing is, I understand that feels unfair, but it isn't, because it's not like people are saying hire him. You don't have to hire the minority candidate. Just talk to the guy first. And again, I'm a big fan of that rule. And I know a lot of people tend not to be, because you can't force a team to do something like that. But I think you should. If they're not doing it on their own, I think you should, right? It just, in the name of diversity, just interview the guy. You don't have to hire him. You don't have to like him. You just have to interview the person. Now, I think you should pull somebody that you actually do intend to hire and do actually like. But if a league or a state or a set of rules has to force you to do that, then by all means, go ahead and do that. Because I'm not one of these people that's like, okay, just hire any guy or interview any guy. Interview a guy that's qualified. Interview a guy that might actually make you better. And there is no doubt that one of the best coaching options available was Willie Taggart. And it's a great hire for them. It really is. I mean, it does a lot for them. And in terms of having more black people coaching, having more black people coaching in a major power conference says a lot about the progression of college sports. Any sport, really, but the progression of college sports. Because we lacking that diversity at that particular position is a throwback to days when people believed that black people and minorities really were not intelligent enough to do that. And so the respect is there, and it feels like it's finally here. And so you have it, and you just kind of have to take advantage of these moments. So, like, I'll be rooting for Willie Taggart and hoping that he does really well, in small part because of that. The other coaching hire I wanted to talk about was Matt Rule to Baylor. Did not talk about that at all yesterday. Again, got caught up in, is Cam Newton the spoiled person? Which of course he is. But Baylor needed this. Baylor needed a Matt Rule type hire. First off, I don't think Baylor could have just hired any old big name. If they hired a big name, it had to be a big name that was basically promising that they're going to come in and win right away. Now, the thing about Matt Rule is that Matt Rule's offense is not the Art Briles, spread them out, we're putting numbers on you, right? Like, we're just throwing it over the top of you. This is not going to be the Robert Griffin III teams that were there. So now we're not going to have that. A bit more of a traditional looking offense. Now, I say a little bit more of a traditional looking offense because I've listened to people talk about this, and people talk about Matt Rule and Matt Rule's offense like he's going to take Baylor back to the 90s. And, you're going to run your traditional offense out of the I formation. I mean, we're not going to see that. Okay. Matt Rule runs a spread. He does. It's not 5 wide receivers on every play, but it is a spread offense. He does go wide. He does spread you out. He does throw the ball around a little bit. But also a guy that is able to do and make the impact that he had at Temple, where he got Temple their first 10-win season in program history. That kind of guy is the guy that you want at Baylor, because you're going to have to overcome quite a few things. But if we haven't learned anything from James Franklin over at Penn State, those things are overcomable. And if you overcome the restrictions and all of the things, the blowback from the NCAA fallout, if you overcome all of those things, right, then what you end up having is a good college football coach and a Power 5 conference in the state of Texas being able to recruit from the state of Texas. That is a brilliant hire for Baylor. So now you end up with some jobs open that are now at least higher profile jobs than they were previously, right? Like you've got the Temple job now open. You've got the Southern Florida job now open. You've got Les Miles floating in the wind. His name is floating around. Charlie Strong, if he wants to coach again, can coach again next season, walk into USF and probably get that job if he feels so inclined, if he really wants to, or if he wants to take a year off and gather his thoughts, because the buyout of his contract was as such that he's going to still end up with quite a lot of money. Look, he can do whatever he wants. And then, of course, you've got Lane Kiffin, and I think that he's going to wind up in one of these places. I really do. I do, because I just don't see a world in which Nick Saban doesn't desperately and furiously block his chances of being a coordinator. Nick Saban is a very secretive guy. He likes to keep everything close to the chest. He has hired people from other teams before in what I imagine is only a bid to end up using your secrets. And if Nick Saban is the kind of guy who will hire you for that reason, then I can't imagine that he would allow that to happen to himself, right? You don't want to be gamed on. You want a game, you don't want to be gamed on. And Nick Saban is in a position where that could very likely happen to him. Nothing would make my heart happier than Lane Kiffin, offensive coordinator at LSU, because Nick Saban would be so frustrated and furious and mad. Nothing would please me more. At all. So we've got some college football playoff talk to get into. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Washington. Those are the four teams. Alabama, I think we all agree they're the best team in the nation. But when you start to look through Alabama's body of work, who have they played? Really, who has Alabama actually played? We'll get into that because it's a little tenuous. And by the way, we got to talk about something, right? It's either question Alabama or crown them. You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose on Nooga Radio. Nooga Radio, AM 1240, and NoogaRadio.com.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
AM 1240 Nooga Radio News, Russell Stroud reporting. The City Council in Chattanooga has approved the purchase of body cameras for the Chattanooga Police Department to the tune of $2.19 million. The city will also be getting some help from the feds at $300,000. Guidelines are being put together by the police chief, Fred Fletcher. They're supposed to be in line with the Department of Justice guidelines already in existence. Officers are expected to have these body cameras first quarter 2017 in just a few months. Several shootings rocking the Chattanooga area in the last few days, and so far no gunmen have been found. One of the shootings appears to be gang-related, another a botched robbery, and another one possibly just a random shooting. All the victims have survived with minor injuries, and all the gunmen are still on the loose. New efforts are being seen in various cities around Hamilton County to decentralize the school system. Yusuf Hakeem in the Chattanooga City Council is asking questions about what's going to be done about schools which were paid for by the county, which would then be used by the city if the city secedes, so to speak, from the county school system. If it's going on the Tennessee Valley, it's going on AM 1240
nighttime hours. Could see a late sprinkle or mountain flurry pass through, lows mid and upper 30s. For your Thursday, breezy, colder out there, even with some sunshine returning. High struggling to reach the lower to middle 40s. Very cold tomorrow night with lows 20 to 24. This forecast is brought to you by Hamilton Medical Center in Dalton. Now featuring their Neurosurgery and Spine Center open in Calhoun. Stop putting up with back pain. For more, 706-529-9041. And I'm Sports Team 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Moore.
On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
There's a reason why Alliance Physical Therapy is a choice of professionals and those who care about first-class, top-notch service and treatment. Because at Alliance Physical Therapy of Chattanooga, we don't just treat the symptoms in your body. Whether you're suffering from stiffness, muscle spasms, back pain, chronic headaches every day, stress of life demanding more and more of you, Alliance Physical Therapy takes a holistic approach to healing, mind, body, and soul. Alliance Physical Therapy with a location near you and 9 others in the Chattanooga area. If you don't have a doctor or if your physician's plan for chronic pain is not working, Alliance Physical Therapy will help. Visit Alliance Physical Therapy on the web at nopainpt.com. That's nopainpt.com. Alliance Physical Therapy.
Cash, and more cash. Hey, where do you think Santa shops? Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. He made a special stop to tell Rick, slash those prices 50 to 70%. Ooh, ho, ho. That's right. Get 50 to 70% off right now for Christmas at Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Even Rick's not going to say no to Santa. No. Don't wait till after Christmas. It'll be way too late. Get your cash right now for your gold, your silver, your diamonds, and jewelry, and save 50 to 70% off. On a $100 item, it's only $30. On a $1,000 item, $300. Has Rick gone mad?
Well, maybe a little.
No, we think he's just Christmassy. Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds, 50% off right now. Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds, Brainerd Road, Chattanooga. You know where it is. Hey, is that Santa? Cash, and more cash.
And now to our reporter in the field.
We asked Ray at Ray's Plumbing what's important for homeowners to know.
Some field line systems can cost upwards of $10,000. The bottom line is to save yourself money down the road. I would definitely recommend everybody with a septic that is not on county or city sewer to have an inspection done by a qualified professional. It'd be great if nobody did inspections on them for all plumbing companies. That's what we do to make a living. Not to scare anyone, but it should be in the back of your mind. The danger is the field lines failing and costing thousands upon thousands of dollars and tearing your yard up. By preventative maintenance, you're saving yourself a large headache that may displace yourself and your family. That happens more often than you think. The waste is designed to stay in the tank, and that waste will build up over time. Even with treatment, we have to help that waste break down. Ultimately, preventative maintenance is the key that will keep you from spending $5,000 to $10,000 on replacing your septic system. The bottom line is to save yourself money down the road.
Call Ray at Ray's Plumbing, 421-6341, 421-6341.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Fox News Talk 1240.
So over at The Ringer, theringer.com, that is, which I just started reading this for the first time today. I've never actually sat down and read any of The Ringer. And I got to say, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. But over at The Ringer, Zach Cram has a write-up on Alabama and who they have played this season. Because on the face of it, you're like, no, Alabama's overcome a lot. Alabama plays in the SEC West. That's the best division in college football. Alabama's been really good this season. They're the best team in the nation. And that's mostly true. Alabama is actually the best team in the nation. Even with any criticism about their schedule, right? But the SEC is not the same SEC that it was when we started doing this whole college football playoff thing a while ago, right? When the college football playoff made their first ever rankings, the College Football Playoff Committee, these were the top 6 teams when they made their first ever rankings. Miss State was 1. Thanks, Dak Prescott. Florida State was number 2. Auburn was number 3. Ole Miss was 4. Oregon was 5. Alabama was 6. So of the top 6 teams from the first ever rankings, you had 4 SEC schools. Like that was an actual possibility that we were thinking, wow, the SEC is probably going to flood the college football playoff. And you're thinking, well, no, some of those schools are going to beat up on each other and we're just not going to wind up with it. But the fact of the matter was the SEC was clearly superior to everybody else. And to beat those schools were to prove that you were the best and finest in college football. That's not the same SEC that we're looking at this season. I think if you just look at the numbers and look at the records, the SEC is still the best conference in college football. But that's being carried by the SEC West. That's one. Two, and I think this was on the SEC on CBS podcast that somebody mentioned that you don't play the whole conference, obviously. You play 40% of the conference is not played in a given season. 40%. So even if the conference is tough, even in years when the conference is great, you may not be playing the best or toughest teams in your conference, or even when they are hottest or when they are best. And if that is missing from your schedule. So you have that as well. So when you keep that stuff in mind and you look at what Alabama has done this season, 13-0, with a chance to be the first college football program to go 15-0 in a very, very long time. 13-0. Can you honestly say that Alabama this year has played the best schools? Have they played the toughest schedule? Have they played a tough schedule at all? Okay? Because when you're looking at the most exciting games this season, the most exciting game of the season, for sure, according to ESPN, Tennessee and Georgia. Most exciting play of the year, Tennessee and Georgia. And those two schools began the season ranked, and they're not ranked right now, right? They both ended 4-4 in the SEC. Alabama, unbeaten. But when you look at the fact that the SEC hasn't been good, especially the East, who has Alabama actually played? Right? You could say they played USC. They played USC. Beat them 52-6. Right? Waxed the Trojans. But here's the thing. That USC team that you played at the beginning of the season is not the same USC team that we're looking at now and going, yeah, that school's good. The USC school that's going to be coming into the season next season, that's the school to look out for. The school that started this season, different school. Different school. Might as well have been, I don't know, Oregon State. Like really, just not even the same school. And that school's going to the Rose Bowl, and you beat the worst version of them badly, right? You knock off Tennessee. Tennessee still had a winning record at the time. Texas A&M was undefeated when you played them. And, you know, Vandy and A&M losing to the Mississippi schools. Alabama's wins start to diminish the more you look at them. Nobody has ever really, like, we're calling Alabama's defense the best defense that we've seen. And again, you look at that defense play, and there's no reason why you shouldn't believe that. Taking back things that I've previously said. I'm just questioning them because there's nothing left to do now. Alabama's ruined all of our lives. So here's the thing. You look at the Ole Miss game. Chad Kelly is the only person who has tested Alabama's secondary. For exactly one half of football, Chad Kelly tested Alabama's secondary. Ole Miss, who was not doing great when they ran into Alabama at that point in the season, ended up doing much worse They're not bowl eligible. And that's the only quarterback test you've actually faced. So, I mean, this isn't to say that anybody in the playoff could actually beat Alabama. But when you look at the schools that are left, you still don't have any schools left that can really test the secondary of Alabama outside of Clemson. What's interesting to note is when you look down all of the schools that Alabama has played. In fact, I'm surprised I haven't pulled that up as yet. Alabama has not played a quarterback outside of Chad Kelly who can really give them a run for their money, who can really give that defense a scare, right? The most quality opponent Alabama has rolled up onto this season is LSU. And I've told you many times, I don't know how good LSU is either, because they haven't, all the schools that they've beaten, whenever somebody is ranked and they play LSU, they beat them. LSU hasn't beaten anybody. In fact, this conversation makes more sense for LSU than it does for Alabama. Alabama might be our national champions, though, so this is where the conversation's headed. But make no mistake about it, I think that's a fair criticism to have. And at this point, right, like, I'm just criticizing convention. I'm criticizing convention because it's what's left to talk about. Like yesterday, you got to criticize the Heisman, right? There's no good reason why Lamar Jackson shouldn't win the Heisman. But you could make a case for Deshaun Watson, right? I think a lot of people thought Jabril Peppers was overrated. I don't think he's overrated. I just don't think corners have the impact on the game that quarterbacks do. And we have not yet come up with a way to statistically generate what it is that they do, as well as it is for quarterbacks. So he's just not going to win it. But you could make the argument. Right? You could seriously make that argument. You are listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. Make sure to check out my Twitter page, @SportsCloud. I tweet things during games, and sometimes they're funny. Though, you know, I make no promises. It's hard to figure this stuff out in college football, right? Because of just what ends up happening. You just play a lot of games. There's no organization or rhyme or reason as to why you are playing certain games. And, you get to decide a lot of your schedule, so you don't have to play anybody good if you don't want to. You don't have to play anybody great if you don't want to. All of those things. But it's interesting. It's interesting because Ohio State's in the playoff. And we'll get to the Ohio State in a little bit. But Ohio State's in the playoff, and they're not a conference champion. And can you have a non-conference champion represent their conference in the playoff? Well, obviously now it's happening, and they're setting precedents with this thing. And like the more we have of this, the more precedents the committee sets, the more we'll get some kind of rhyme or reason as to how this all works out. But hopefully with Ohio State being rewarded for having a test on their schedule, hopefully more people will schedule out of conference tests so that we can actually figure out who's good here, because we don't have that. We just don't. So Alabama, let's take a look at all of the schools that they've played, right? USC to start the season, then they played Western Kentucky. Ole Miss, Chad Kelly tests them for exactly one half of football, as is his custom this season. Kent State, Kentucky, Arkansas. Austin Allen did test the secondary. Arkansas puts up 30. They give up 50, but they put up 30. Okay? And Austin Allen, this is a game in which the front four of Alabama, they were getting to him, and they were putting pressure on him. And the dude still throws for like darn near 400 yards. I think you can get over the top of Alabama's secondary if you have a quarterback that can do it. Problem is, nobody has a quarterback that can do it. Tennessee, whacked, right? And not only were the Vols already like heavily injured up in that point of the season, but they were like, this was just the beginning of like their worst football. Like, it just all went downhill from here. A&M, Trevor Knight, good dual threat quarterback. He's not the most accurate guy, and he's not the guy that's going to test Alabama. And by the way, this was sort of the beginning of all the troubles for the Aggies. They would beat the Vols a week later and then, just sort of fall off the face of the earth. Then LSU, which is a game where you were never going to get a test from LSU's offense. Because, again, in order to beat Alabama, I think you've got to test that secondary. You have to. And they just didn't have the firepower to do it. Mississippi State only put up 3. They played the Mocs, and the Mocs can't test Alabama's secondary, but they did get Alabama to play a bad game. And then they played Auburn, which has returned to its ways, but Auburn runs the football, and Alabama can get into your backfield with just 4 guys. So if you're just looking at that, and then, of course, they beat Florida in the title game. So what we're looking at, basically, is an Alabama schedule riddled with teams that don't have quarterbacks, that don't have strong defenses, and certainly never both at once. Right? Like, the closest thing you had to that was Arkansas, which, if you would have told me of all the schools that Alabama played this year, LSU and Arkansas would be the 2 schools that would really push Alabama, I don't know if I would have believed you after like week 4 of the season. Mostly because Arkansas just is, I mean, they're Arkansas. Like, they're known for being a running school. Certainly not like the passing juggernaut that they've become. But Austin Allen is the truth. So I could not look at that and honestly tell you, Alabama's played somebody elite. If you look at this schedule, they have not played one elite college football program this season. Not another school that you could argue is on their level. The playoff is going to be the first place that is actually going to happen to them, which is incredible when you think about it. We played 2 quarterbacks capable of testing them. Austin Allen and Trevor Knight. That's it. 2 quarterbacks capable of testing them. And Trevor Knight, you mostly thought he was capable of testing them because of when he was at Oklahoma. His last run-in with Alabama went magnificently. This one not so much. And Alabama rolls up on Washington, and Washington's got a freshman quarterback. He can be streaky, up and down. He's a reasonable, actually, he is a reasonable facsimile for Jalen Hurts. He is not the greatest quarterback of all time, but he is a very, very good and very capable quarterback, and certainly integral to what it is that they do up there in Washington. Not that I'm going to give you a Washington pregame or anything, because I haven't done enough of the research, but certainly Washington's situation is not super different, actually, from Alabama's situation. So that's a matchup that is a surprisingly decent matchup. You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. Make sure to check me out on Twitter. My handle is @SportsCloud. I tweet funny things sometimes. Just saying. So, who's Alabama played? Not really anybody. And that's not to take away from how good they've been this season. The fact that if you've watched this team with your own 2 eyes, that they're the best team in college football. Because here's the thing. It's not like they played a bunch of schools and you're like, wow, those schools aren't great. They're not great. Those schools aren't great. And they got by just by the skin of their teeth. They punched all of these schools in the face. Every school that could not hold a candle to them, they punched all of those schools in the face. Okay? Like, some of these scores don't even make sense. Right? Like the Mississippi State score, the title game score, they beat them by 38. The Vegas line was 24, which I would never have thought. Two schools preparing for one another, one school trying to beat the other and themselves a champion of the other division in the same conference. One school would have beaten the other school by 38. Like, I just would not have imagined that. So even just like on an eye test level, Alabama, they are the best school in the nation. But like, if you just want to look at their schedule and who they've played and the level of difficulty and all of those things, well, I mean, you have to drudge up some doubt there. Now, Ohio State making it to the college football playoff without winning their conference championship. That is interesting to me, because the committee had said winning your conference championship does not guarantee you a college football playoff spot. But we'd never seen it, right? Like, even the year that, like, okay, so TCU and Baylor, the year that they were co-champions of the Big 12, they didn't make it. But that just felt like, okay, you made them co-champions. We don't have to choose either of them then. That's like the same as not winning your thing at all, really. You don't have a championship game and you're going to name them co-champions? Yeah, you're out of here. So that didn't necessarily prove that winning your conference championship doesn't necessarily guarantee you a spot at the table. But the Big Ten does have a conference championship. And Penn State ends up on the outside of the glass looking in. And that's mostly interesting because Ohio State wasn't in the championship game at all. And if you look at the Big Ten, I mean, it's hard not to argue that Ohio State's not the best team in the Big Ten. You really think that Penn State's better? Like, Penn State's not better. And it sucks if you're Penn State, because Penn State is depressingly always left on the outside of these things. Like, I'm not happy that it happened, but it makes the most sense. Right? Like Ohio State being the champion. Like, they didn't end up being the champion, but like, had they had the opportunity to be the champion, I can't imagine that they wouldn't have been. And part of it is that Ohio State played Oklahoma. And taking that risk and putting the difficult school on your schedule will get rewarded by the committee, right? Like strength of schedule. It is something that they say, according to their list of 4 criteria, that they pay attention to. But the not having, or rather having one of the criteria does not guarantee that you get in. And I like that, because they said that, it did eventually happen, because it was starting to feel like, yeah, they say you don't have to win your conference championship, but they keep putting in all these teams that are only conference champions. So I like the debate, but what a weird system. You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. We'll be back with more college football talk next.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Mark Truex Jr. is off the pace and he is headed to the pit lane. Elliott Powers around the outside. Michael McDowell pops the right front tire. Here's Mark Truex to the bottom. Blaney blocked him off too. Meanwhile, Chase Elliott went 4 wide on the back straightaway. They're side by side for the lead.
Hear it live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station.
Hot News Talk 1240.
The voice of NASCAR.
Is your career taking you where you want to go? If not, talk to Covenant Group Insurance, especially if you like helping people. Call and learn how you can work for yourself, but not by yourself. Intense but free training, plus a fantastic lead program, plus office support equals your success, your prosperity. Gross at least $75,000 your first year selling insurance. Call Steve or Jada for a confidential interview. That's 855-8484. Maybe the most important call you'll make all year. Look
Looking for a dream home, or maybe you're just a first-time home buyer? Let an agent get you started today on your house search. If you're a real estate agent looking for a change, see what Exit can do for you. The agents at Exit Realty Scenic City are confident they can sell your house. They can do it in 99 days or less. If no one works harder for you than agents at Exit Realty Scenic City, licensed in Tennessee and Georgia. Exit sells quickly all types of commercial and residential properties and vacant land. Looking for a dream home, or maybe you're just a first-time home buyer? Let an agent get you started today on your house search. If you're a real estate agent looking for a change, see what Exit can do for you. Training, technology, branding, culture, and financial freedom. Again, Exit Realty Scenic City. Call 423-551-EXIT to learn more. Call 423-551-EXIT and learn more.
Terms and restrictions may apply. And now to our reporter in the field.
We asked Ray at Ray's Plumbing what's important for homeowners to know.
Some field line systems can cost upwards of $10,000. The bottom line is to save yourself money down the road. I would definitely recommend everybody with a septic that is not on county or city sewer to have an inspection done by a qualified professional. It'd be great if nobody did inspections on them for all plumbing companies. That's what we do to make a living. Not to scare anyone, but it should be in the back of your mind. The danger is the field lines failing and costing thousands upon thousands of dollars and tearing your yard up. By preventative maintenance, you're saving yourself a large headache that may displace yourself and your family. That happens more often than you think. The waste is designed to stay in the tank, and that waste will build up over time. Even with treatment, we have to help that waste break down. Ultimately, preventative maintenance is the key that will keep you from spending $5,000 to $10,000 on replacing your septic system. The bottom line is to save yourself money down the road.
Call Ray at Ray's Plumbing, 421-6341, 421-6341.
At Eyer Optical, it's a well-known fact. When you buy one pair of glasses, you get a second pair absolutely free. But did you know Eyer Optical has the largest eyeglass selection in the area, with top-name brands and styles in the latest trends? Schedule your appointment with one of the doctors today for a comprehensive eye exam. And remember, when you buy one pair of glasses, you get a second pair absolutely free. Visit EyerOptical.com for a location near you.
Eyer Optical. Finding just the right place to live can be a daunting task. Stop your search. In Chattanooga, the place to live is Cross Creek Villas for under $1,000 and available for immediate move-in. You can enjoy this 2-bedroom split layout, over 1,000 square feet, 9-foot ceilings, an extra large patio or balcony. And don't forget to ask about their preferred employer program. Cross Creek Villas is a gated community offering a 24-hour fitness facility, a beautiful pool and hot tub, and Cross Creek
You give us
Villas
12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
WSDT Sunny Daisy, Chattanooga.
Environmental groups question the Trump administration pick as EPA administrator.
We're just scratching our heads here.
2 people facing charges after they allegedly set wildfires that burned in Tennessee.
Fortunately, these 2 individuals are juvenile.
This is the CBS World News Roundup Late Edition. I'm Dave Barrett. Oklahoma's Attorney General Scott Pruitt is the Trump transition team's choice to become Environmental Protection Agency Administrator. Bob Deans at the Natural Resources Defense Council is critical of this pick.
This is a guy who has sued to block the EPA from protecting our wetlands and streams. He's sued to block the agency from keeping mercury, arsenic, and lead out of the air we breathe.
I'm Dan Raviv in Washington. Democrats are outraged, saying Pruitt has used his career to push the agenda of big polluters and climate deniers. It's noteworthy that other Trump nominees have been strong critics of the agencies they're slated to head. Betsy DeVos at Education, Ben Carson on Public Housing, and Congressman Tom Price to be Health Secretary.
This afternoon, former World Wrestling Entertainment Chief Exec Linda McMahon chosen to run the Small Business Administration. She once used a phrase associated with Donald Trump to terminate an announcer on the air.
On behalf of the entire McMahon family, you're fired.
More on McMahon from CBS's Steve Dorsey.
Former Connecticut Senate candidate, was an early supporter of Mr. Trump's campaign. He's a WWE Hall of Fame member. The Small Business Administration has offices spanning the nation, providing loans and working with small businesses to secure federal contracts.
Another nominee, John Kelly, a retired U.S. Marines general chosen to head up Homeland Security. The president-elect has been honored by Time magazine as its Person of the Year in what was called the divided states of America. He told NBC's Today Show,
I think putting divided is snarky. But again, it's divided. I'm not president yet, so I didn't do anything to divide.
Another big day on Wall Street. The Dow closing up 297 to finish at a record high, 19,549. Market analyst Art Hogan.
The run has been predicated on better economic data and certainly a positive feeling about the administration heading into 2017 being more pro-business, more pro-growth, and probably less intent on regulation.
Following wildfires that burned around Gatlinburg, Tennessee, Sevier County DA James Dunn announced
this morning 2 juveniles were taken into custody by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation on allegations of aggravated arson.
In Oakland, warehouse recovery efforts have ended. In Charleston, South Carolina, opening statements in the Dylan Roof trial. He's accused of shooting 9 people last year. Now this.
I owed the IRS $10,000.
The IRS garnished my wages.
They put a lien on my house. The IRS is the most powerful collection agency in the world. They do not give up until you pay.
I couldn't sleep. We were being audited. I called Tax Solutions Now, and a great big weight was lifted off my shoulders.
I called Tax Solutions Now, and they got the IRS off my back.
Tax Solutions Now had my wage garnishment lifted in 48 hours.
Tax Solutions Now can get you help. Our agents know the rules, can stop the pain, and get you the best deal. We connect you with a team of former IRS agents and tax professionals who will get the IRS off your back.
We saved our home and overcame the most powerful collection agency in the world.
Call Tax Solutions now. Time is running out. Call 800-755-0466, 800-755-0466, 800-755-0466, 800-755-0466.
It was 75 years to the day at 7:55 in the morning at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. A ship's bell rang, marking the moment the Japanese attack began on December 7th, 1941. When it ended, 2,403 people were dead. And they were remembered on this Blue Sky Wednesday. Arizona Senator John McCain spoke in D.C. at the World War II Memorial.
Many American families were changed that day. Many endured the pain of separation from loved ones, and many suffered the pain that time never completely heals.
John Glenn enlisted in the Army Air Corps right after the Pearl Harbor attack. He flew in Korea and in space. Twice. The first American to orbit the Earth, now hospitalized in Ohio. He's 95.
You want more business. You want to increase your bottom line. You want to spend less.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Here's what advertisers are saying about AM 1240. HotNewsTalkRadio.com.
Radio station, they really care. They're always calling me probably once a week, checking on me, seeing how things going, see if they want to change any of the ads or do anything different, seeing what my needs are. I've gotten business off the ads that you do for me, and seems to be working well at this point.
Prices were very fair. Areas in this town that we aren't able to get other ways, your radio station is able to help us out, and I really appreciate that.
We've been very pleased with the services we've got. It seems like everybody over there cares about what they're going to do, how it's going to work for us on this end. And we've been very impressed with the creativity of the ads that we've heard. And they always seem to be right on point, even without us having to come up with what's going to be said.
I've been doing business with News Talk Radio for quite some time. It's the best place and the best value you can get for your advertisement. The commercials are great. They're very professional. I was actually blown away.
The commercial that they put together was awesome. It was way far above all the other radio stations we've dealt with. The best we've had yet, guarantee you, by far.
AM 1240, HotNewsTalkRadio.com gets results. Let us get results for your business. For no obligation free consultation, call General Sales Manager Steve Johnson. Call 423-240-5459. That's 240-5459. Or you can always email Steve at NoogaRadioSteve@gmail.com. That's NoogaRadioSteve@gmail.com. AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio. We get results.
You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. This is the second hour of the show. We get together every day at 6 o'clock and shoot the breeze, talk some sports for a couple of hours. It's college football playoff season. And we're getting down to the end of the NFL. But mostly, we've got award season. We've got, I believe there were All-Americans released today. So we'll get to that in the show. It's award season. So we've got the All-Americans. You've got the Heisman Awards, which, of course, nobody's allowed to talk about and or release. The Heisman Award show is just a gigantic event. Just this gigantic event. And I'm not going to lie to you. I don't watch the whole Heisman Award show. I watched the end. They got the Heisman Trophy ready. They introduced the finalists. The finalists they announce the winner. The winner gives a speech. I'm done. I'm not going to try and sit down and watch all 3 hours of it. Like the college football playoff show, I don't know anybody that watches the whole thing of that either. It's a 4-hour show dedicated to 4 teams. 4. They go through the whole list of teams, but nobody cares about the other schools, We're looking at the 4 that we care about. Who is in the playoff? Don't mess with us in this other stuff. Who's in the playoff? So, yeah, I hate that fake drama, by the way. Like it just annoys me. There's a lot of buildup. You're acting like we don't know who roughly those top teams are, and we want to know who's in and who's out for you. And it's manufactured, televised drama. I don't have time for it. I'm pretty sure you don't have time for it. I don't watch it. I spend not 1 second watching the college football playoff because they put it up on YouTube like minutes after they're done with it anyway, and then I just watch the YouTube clip. Just not going to sit down and watch 4 hours of college football playoff coverage when the committee is basically they're basically a group of people trying to figure this thing out too. And I'd like that show behind the scenes with the college football playoff committee. Like, what does that conversation look like when they're all sitting around talking about who deserves to be in and who deserves to be out? That's what I want to hear. I want that transparency there. I don't want to sit around and watch, a bunch of ESPN guys talk about it. I don't care about that. I don't want to watch a bunch of those dudes talk about it. I want to hear the people who are making the actual decisions talk about it. And they do, but the problem is they kind of don't tell us anything. They say a lot of words, right? But first off, that we're in the coverage area of the Vols, where we are located. Everybody here is tired of that. People who say a lot, but don't really say anything. They use a lot of words. A lot of verbiage comes out of their mouths, but they're not actually saying anything. Yeah, we're a little bit tired of that. What we're not tired of is the transparency. Just tell us what you were thinking. Tell us what you were doing. They're not going to get in trouble. We're not their parents. If they make a decision and we disagree with the decision, guess whose decision it still is? It's still their decision. Like, we still have to have a committee. So what difference does it make if there's transparency or if there's not transparency? Like, yeah, you're probably not going to be on the committee again if you're really awful, but they didn't repeat the committee from last year. So what difference does it make? I really want them to get this college football playoff thing right, because here's the thing. We're going to expand to 8 games. It is inevitable. I don't think that anybody is really seeking 8 games. I don't know. As a fan, I'm not clamoring for 8 games. Or 8 teams in the playoffs, sorry. For 8 teams. It's one of those things where if it happens, it would be cool. But I'm not clamoring for it right now. Especially because we just haven't figured out all of the problems with this 4-team situation. And I think we should get this straightened out before we even consider going to 8. Because you only increase the problems when you add 8. When you make when you make it go from 4 teams to 8 teams, people act like that solves the problems. It doesn't solve the problems. You add more problems when you add more teams, because what you end up doing is expanding the range to teams, expanding the range of teams that are on the bubble. Right now, you've got 4 teams, and teams that are on the bubble, they're just a handful of teams, right? Penn State is on the bubble. Just a little bit. Right? Like Michigan on the bubble. Just a handful of teams. You don't have 5, 6, 7 teams on the bubble. So you don't have 5, 6, 7 angry fan bases going, well, why not us? Why didn't we get in? Because you didn't get in. If you expand to 8 teams, you're going to have the debate of a 3-loss school or a 4-loss school possibly that had a tougher schedule, and a 2-loss school gets in. And their schedule was soft. It was silly putty. It didn't mean anything, and it didn't matter. But they've got 2 losses. So do we let them in? Do you have to change your criteria now because you're going to have teams that aren't conference champions in there? I mean, I know we've got that now, but that is a part of your criteria. Go to the document that the College Football Playoff Selection Committee releases. This is the criteria that they have, their own criteria of how they choose who gets in. Criteria number 1, the first thing they list is championships won. So winning your conference championship. The second one, strength of schedule. The third one is head-to-head competition if it occurred, which is, I'm about to address that in a second because this is how you fix all of this. And comparative outcomes of common opponents without incenting margin of victory, which to me is impossible. You can, if you're going to compare how 2 teams played against the school, right? How do you not take into account the margin of victory? I like on some level, it registers, doesn't it? What you're telling me is you can take into account the margin of victory and it does not register to you at all. And I just don't believe that. If you know the score, if you watched how the 2 teams played, you're going to be, by definition, taking into account margin of victory. Even if you take into account only other statistics, like turnovers, like touchdowns scored in that game, like passing yards given up. Even if you take those stats into account, those are things that ultimately influence the score. So you can't compare what 2 teams did against one school and not take into account on some level the margin of victory. It's just not possible. Now, head-to-head competition, that's where that gets weird, because if you are going on head-to-head competition the 2 schools had with one another, I think it's bizarre. Because most schools don't play head-to-head often enough, right? Inside of the same conference, you can have head-to-head competition, but I don't think that we've gotten to the point with the College Football Playoff Committee just yet where 2 schools from one conference are getting in. And big schools in big conferences do not play out of conference big schools very often. Like, you're not seeing that multiple times on a college football schedule. You can see that on a college basketball schedule. You can. You can see a Duke play a Kansas and a Kentucky in one season. It happens. Right? You see these things. Tennessee can play in basketball multiple powerful schools from another conference. It happens all the time. It doesn't happen all the time in college football. So those head-to-head matchups, I think, would actually be the best way to try and figure out who deserves to get in and who doesn't deserve to get in, which means the committee has to do exactly what they did this year, or the NCAA is going to have to start forcing some people to play out of conference. They probably will not do that. They do not have the teeth and or power to actually enforce that on anybody, but it would be nice because if you got people to play outside of their conference against bigger schools more frequently, you'd have those head-to-head matchups that don't feel like guessing. It feels more like guessing right now. I'm just not a fan of that. You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. Make sure to check me out on Twitter. I'm gonna have more things for you to check out, but let's start with Twitter. @SportsCloud is my handle. You can tweet at me. Also, we have a radio show, Two Millennials Talk, Thursday night at 8:00. If you want to check that out as well, I highly recommend it personally. So Lane Kiffin is being considered for the University of South Florida job. And Lane Kiffin being considered for the University of South Florida job is interesting to me in large part because I know that Nick Saban would love nothing more than to see that. Lane Kiffin away from him. That's really what this is about. Get Lane Kiffin away from me as far as humanly possible. Because Lane Kiffin is the reason why Alabama is in the college football playoff. They're the reason why Alabama made it last year. And they're the reason why Alabama is making it this year. And they're the reason why Alabama is as good as they are this year. Because we were all expecting a drop-off from Alabama. Now, I could choose to believe that we were all wrong and we were all stupid and none of us made any sense. But that doesn't work out logistically. It doesn't work out. Alabama should have dropped off by rights. This defense is younger and less experienced. This offense is younger and less experienced. This is why teams drop off. By all rights, the Crimson Tide should have been worse this year than last year. And yet somehow they got better. Why do you think that was? Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin brought an offense to Alabama that they had not previously been running. And yeah, it does help that they've got a guy in Jalen Hurts who can run a lot of those things that Lane Kiffin wants to run. But it works because Lane Kiffin is there willing to run them. And they've given Alabama another dimension that they haven't had. Alabama possesses the ball for long periods of time. They keep it forever. Their offense plays a defensive role because they keep the ball away from your offense. Then on top of that, they score a ton of points. They don't just march it up the field. Very frequently, Alabama scores, and they score in the 40s and 50s. They score a lot. Okay, and they push people around, which is not necessarily new for Alabama. But they push people around, and they go downfield. They take a lot of these downfield shots. They are offensively more aggressive. That's Lane Kiffin. So, yeah. Where Lane Kiffin winds up is important to Nick Saban, but the University of South Florida job, to me, that's an interesting landing spot for Kiffin, if not because he is he's trying to get back to big-time college football. Lane Kiffin has been a college football head coach before, but it's been about 8 years. It's been about 8 years, and he wants to get back. Anybody would. But I think he's good enough to get back. And I think you can be gun shy of Lane Kiffin because there's a lot of reasons to be gun shy about Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin can be in front of the media, impulsive. But this is, again, all of this information that we have on Lane Kiffin, all of this stuff is connected to how Lane Kiffin was the last time he had an opportunity to be a head coach. How much better has he gotten now? And how does this impact the sort of Nick Saban coaching tree? Because the Kirby Smart Georgia experience has not started out exactly the way that we hoped that it was going to start out. Right? Like, I thought Kirby Smart Georgia, that's a no-brainer. That is a hire that makes so much sense. And I'm not willing to back off of that just yet because it's a really good hire. Like when you look at what Alabama did last year defensively, and the defensive coordinator wants to come and coach for your school, and you've got your quarterback of the future coming in Jacob Eason, why not pull the trigger on that? And they did. Makes a ton of sense. But Lane Kiffin is going to be going to the University of South Florida. And look, you're just not going to have the talent. And here's the thing that we make with coaches all the time. We make this mistake with coaches very frequently. Coaches go places. They do not take the talent with them. They don't, right? Dan Quinn, defensive coordinator up in Seattle, very, very good defensive coordinator, came down to Atlanta to be the head coach. Dan Quinn did not bring Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor with him. And you can see it in the way that Atlanta plays. They still give up big plays down the field. They're not excelling at stopping the run. Defensive coaches and offensive coaches, they don't bring their best players with them. And that does have an impact on how good they are. Shouldn't have as much of an impact in college football, but it does. Because if that were the case, Texas would have been a better defensive team with Charlie Strong. If that were the case, Tennessee should be even more of a prolific offense with Butch Jones. Yeah, just because you specialize in something doesn't necessarily mean you're going to fix and or turn around that thing at another school. So Lane Kiffin heading to South Florida does not make South Florida an offensive juggernaut. It might, but it does not necessarily. And Ohio State and Michigan are the two schools in my recent memory where a coach showed up. He just arrived, and immediately the school was playing better football because he was there. Immediately. Haven't really seen that. Right? Like you look at guys that are considered to be great coaches. Your Art Briles is considered to be a great coach from a coaching perspective, not at all a human perspective, but from a coaching perspective. And it took him a few years of stinking up the joint at Baylor before it finally got working. It's just how it goes. Now you're going to have some patience at South Florida if you're Lane Kiffin, so that's not a bad way to go. My thing is, does Kiffin really want that, and does he really want to be there? Like, how bad does he want to be a head coach? Because I feel like if you wait enough, a desperate enough school might take a leap at you. Right? Like, I feel like that's not a bad way to go about doing things. Or if you jump laterally, okay, and I have been clear that this is what I want. I want the lateral jump from Lane Kiffin. Would it be better for Alabama if Lane Kiffin became a head coach? Yes. I personally would like the lateral jump for Lane Kiffin for the following reason. It would make Nick Saban upset. And angry Nick Saban is the best Nick Saban. He's the best Nick Saban. He's the best for the media. He's the best for quotes. He's the best for talk radio. Angry, grumpy Saban is best Saban. Right? So I don't have any problem with Nick Saban losing Lane Kiffin to like LSU. And LSU could use it. Because while we talk about how much better LSU played under Ed Orgeron, in the 4 games that LSU lost this season, they did not score more than 10 points. LSU could use some saving on the offensive side of the ball. And I think a large part of what's wrong with them is scheme. In fact, that pretty much got proven the instant that Les Miles got fired. All of a sudden, LSU didn't have trouble scoring points anymore. In the games that they lose, they still can't really score. But in the games that they win, they're scoring in bunches. So A fancy, trendy offensive hire at the offensive coordinator position would be great for LSU. And I would like to see Nick Saban just mad as hell. You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. Our number is 800-8949. 800-8949 if you want to weigh in with any of your thoughts on the college football playoff. What else did we talk about today? On Butch Jones, because Butch Jones has got to change the way that he does things and says things. Butch Jones reminds me of Donald Trump. We'll get into that next segment. He reminds me of Donald Trump. And not from any particular political basis. He just, there is a pattern of behavior, let's say, that to me strikes me as very, very similar, even though if you look at it on the face of it, Butch Jones and Donald Trump probably couldn't be more different people in that regard. Butch Jones does have some qualities that reminds me of Donald Trump. So we will talk about that coming up. Also, the college football playoff. And what else do we have around the corner? We've got the All-Americans that were released as well. But quickly, I would like to talk about Jalen Hurts a little bit because ESPN named him the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. And I was going to have some kind of remark and or rebuttal to that because I just love to disagree with the four-letter. But no, can't really disagree with it. Cannot really disagree with it. As much as I want to talk about the offensive line and how linemen get no respect and no love really for what it is that they do, and that Cam Robinson, you could very easily argue him as the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. What Alabama has been able to do with the football this year happens in large part because, like I mentioned before, Lane Kiffin is able to use Jalen Hurts and his talent and skill set to get Alabama offensively places that they've never been. They've never looked like this before. They've never been this explosive. They've never been this dynamic. And sneakily, Nick Saban is about to tie Bear Bryant for 6 championships, 6 national titles. Think about that. That has not been the story of conversation at all, is Nick Saban sort of chasing this greatness. And my argument for that is Nick Saban is kind of already there. I think we already kind of crowned Nick Saban that great coach. You don't become the greatest coach ever the moment you win 6. You are that coach before you win 6, and it's because you are that coach that you are even capable of winning 6. You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. Make sure to check out my Twitter stuff. At SportsCloud is the Twitter. Going to have some nice, cool YouTube things up. And some Facebook Live stuff coming up around the corner as well. All-Americans. Next.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
AM 1240 Nooga Radio News, Russell Stroud reporting. The City Council in Chattanooga has approved the purchase of body cameras for the Chattanooga Police Department to the tune of $2.19 million. The city will also be getting some help from the feds at $300,000. Guidelines are being put together by the police chief, Fred Fletcher. They're supposed to be in line with the Department of Justice guidelines already in existence. Officers are expected to have these body cameras first quarter 2017 in just a few months. Several shootings rocking the Chattanooga area in the last few days, and so far no gunmen have been found. One of the shootings appears to have been gang-related, another a botched robbery, and another one possibly just a random shooting. All the victims have survived with minor injuries, and all the gunmen are still on the loose. New efforts are being seen in various cities around Hamilton County to decentralize the school system. Yusuf Hakeem in the Chattanooga City Council is asking questions about what's going to be done about schools which were paid for by the county, which would then be used by the city if the city secedes, so to speak, from the county school system. If it's going on the Tennessee Valley, it's going on AM 1240
through your nighttime hours.
News.
Could see a late sprinkle or mountain flurry pass through, lows mid and upper 30s. For your Thursday, breezy, colder out there, even with some sunshine returning. High struggling to reach the lower to middle 40s. Very cold tomorrow night with lows 20 to 24. This forecast is brought to you by Hamilton Medical Center in Dalton. Now featuring their neurosurgery and spine center open in Calhoun. Stop putting up with back pain. For more, 706-529-9041. And I'm Swarm Machine 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Moore.
On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
There's a reason why Alliance Physical Therapy is a choice of professionals and those who care about first-class, top-notch service and treatment. Because at Alliance Physical Therapy of Chattanooga, we don't just treat the symptoms in your body. Whether you're suffering from stiffness, muscle spasms, back pain, chronic headaches every day, stress of life demanding more and more of you, Alliance Physical Therapy takes a holistic approach to healing mind, body, and soul. Alliance Physical Therapy with a location near you and 9 others in the Chattanooga area. If you don't have a doctor or if your physician's plan for chronic pain is not working, Alliance Physical Therapy will help. Visit Alliance Physical Therapy on the web at nopainpt.com. That's nopainpt.com. Alliance Physical Therapy.
Cash, and more cash. Hey, where do you think Santa shops? Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. He made a special stop to tell Rick, slash those prices 50 to 70%. Ooh, ho, ho. That's right. Get 50 to 70% off right now for Christmas at Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Even Rick's not going to say no to Santa. No. Don't wait till after Christmas. It'll be way too late. Get your cash right now for your gold, your silver, your diamonds, and jewelry, and save 50 to 70% off. On a $100 item, it's only $30. On a $1,000 item, $300. Has Rick gone mad?
Well, maybe a little.
No, we think he's just Christmassy. Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. 50% off right now. Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds, Brainerd Road, Chattanooga. You know where it is. Hey, is that Santa? Cash, and more cash.
And now to our reporter in the field.
We asked Ray at Ray's Plumbing what's important for homeowners to know.
Some field line systems can cost upwards of $10,000. The bottom line is to save yourself money down the road. I would definitely recommend everybody with a septic that is not on county or city sewer to have an inspection done by a qualified professional. It'd be great if nobody did inspections on them for all plumbing companies. That's what we do to make a living. Not to scare anyone, but it should be in the back of your mind. The danger is the field lines failing and costing thousands upon thousands of dollars and tearing your yard up. By preventative maintenance, you're saving yourself a large headache that may displace yourself and your family. That happens more often than you think. The waste is designed to stay in the tank, and that waste will build up over time. Even with treatment, we have to help that waste break down. Ultimately, preventative maintenance is the key that will keep you from spending $5,000 to $10,000 on replacing your septic system. The bottom line is to save yourself money down the road.
Call Ray at Ray's Plumbing, 421-6341, 421-6341.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
So yeah, we were just talking about Lane Kiffin being the front runner for that South Florida job. I think they should hire Charlie Strong. I think that would work out well enough, right? Just Charlie Strong did a good job of recruiting when he was at Louisville from Florida. So why not put that man in Florida? That's all I'm saying. I think it would work out very nicely. But maybe that's just me. So it's interesting to hear people talk about Butch Jones this season, because for better or for worse, this season has been seen as a failure of a season. And I don't know that you should look at it that way. But I understand, right? If you recall the Chris Rock joke about women and men, which is, a woman cannot go backwards with the kind of man that she is with. Women only go forwards, which means if you are a rich guy, the woman that is with you is not going to go find another poor guy. There's a standard. It's been set. She's right there. She doesn't go backwards. Okay? That's the joke. But seriously, sports fans do not like to go backwards. They can't do it. It's not possible. And this season, even though your record could end up being pretty much identical to last season, felt like backwards. Tennessee played in 2015 a second half of the season that looks good. That didn't look good. That looked great. And basically gave the fan base hope that this Tennessee team is moving somewhere. We are trending upwards. And what happened this year was, even though the records are going to probably come out to be maybe the same, is this. You didn't end strong. You ended poorly. It feels like backwards. And nobody wants backwards. We can't do backwards as sports fans. We don't like it. When your team makes the playoffs, and then your team makes the playoffs again, you expect playoffs the next year. You don't expect to miss it. And when you do, you become extremely frustrated. We cannot do backwards. And Butch Jones, this is year 4. Butch Jones has been increasingly building up. He's been going forward a little bit at a time. This is the first season of Butch Jones that has felt like backwards. So even though you had some criticisms of Butch Jones before as a guy who talks to the media and says nothing, as a guy who doesn't seem to want to take responsibility for his own actions and or mistakes, you have criticisms of Butch Jones coaching, just the decision-making there that you're never going to be able to wrap your mind around, to the point where it's becoming iconic. The champion of life quote is iconic. Okay, the Florida game with the chart didn't say 2-point conversion is iconic. It's all iconic. It's starting to basically need to be trademarked at this point. And so Butch Jones, he's been frustrating, but the team never went backwards underneath him, right? It never failed to progress until this season. And I know the Tennessee fan base well enough, because I've lived here for long enough to say that another year that feels like this can't happen. It's not like you started off slow again and then ended the season strong. And there is a little bit of a misnomer with even that, because we tend to remember schools that finish the season strong, right? Like James Franklin, Penn State. How good is Penn State really? Penn State won like their last 7-8 games in a row. Like Penn State went on a roll there. And even though some of those games were close, could have gone either way, we're going to remember Penn State well because they finished the season strong. And people act like momentum is this thing that carries over from season to season. I'm a believer in momentum. But like locally, which is to say, I think you can carry momentum from the first half to the second half. I think you can carry momentum from this series to the next series. I don't think you can carry momentum from one season to the next season. When you see a team starting to swing in another direction, that's not momentum. That's maturity. That's increase in talent. That's what happens when you see a team get better from one season to the next season after ending strong. The team is maturing. It's growing. But it's not like this invisible force of momentum. That's not a thing that exists. I don't believe you can carry momentum season to season. That's not a thing. Okay? So Tennessee felt like they ended last season with momentum. They didn't. They just played an easier schedule to end their season. And they should have ended this season in a similar fashion because they played an easier schedule to end their season. That's it. I mean, you look at that and then you want to see the growth and maturity. Well, the reason why it feels like this team regressed as opposed to last year's team is because the schedule was easy enough for them to win a lot more games than they should have won, and they didn't. And the reason why they didn't are many. There's injuries, there's coaching snafus, there's the porous defense, and the list goes on and on and on and on. But this season isn't actually worse than last season. Tennessee fans are upset because they feel like the team has regressed, but the team hasn't regressed. This is virtually the same team. There were some things that could have been different, right? Like we could have seen a lot more Alvin Kamara than Jalen Hurd once we figured out that Jalen Hurd and this team was not going to work out this year. You could have done that. But by no means is this team much worse. It's about the same. Now, if the question that you're having is this the limit of Butch Jones? Is this as far as Butch can actually go? And now I think you're asking a better question. I think you're asking a question, and I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe he can go farther. Maybe he just needs a team that stays healthy for an entire season. Maybe he needs a more dynamic quarterback, which isn't to say all the great things about Josh Dobbs about him aren't true. That Josh Dobbs has been a fantastic quarterback for Tennessee. And quite frankly, Tennessee does not get to even be where it is now without that guy. Because I don't know if you can imagine this season without that guy absolutely working his tail off and never giving up on a single game, even when it looked like the rest of the team gave up. Which isn't to say that the rest of the team did give up, because I don't know. I'm just saying when it felt that way, when it looked that way, when it appeared that way, Josh Dobbs played his behind off. He doesn't play defense too, though. This is the same team as last year. And last year's team wasn't great, but we just saw an improving team that won more games going down to the end of the last season, to the end of the season than it lost. And we did not get that same repeat because the losses came in different places. The losses came in the middle of the season, and then one really horrific one at the end. Same amount of losses. And quite frankly, same kinds of losses. Like that Florida loss is not that difference in collapse description from what happened in Vandy. That's roughly the same kind of loss. And a lot of it has to do with coaching. It's the same kind of loss. Josh Dobbs carried as much as he could carry. But if you had a more dynamic quarterback, a guy that's probably more accurate as a passer or a speedster, right? Like a Lamar Jackson, let's say, right? Or Deshaun Watson. I'm just looking around at guys I would describe as more dynamic than Josh Dobbs. Those guys are great. If you had one of those guys, do you think Butch Jones is still going to end at 9-4? Because I don't think so. And I suppose you could say, well, if a more dynamic quarterback is what you need, man, then you got to go out and get one. Yeah, but easier said than done. Finding quarterbacks is difficult. And finding guys that you can polish from high school to be that, it's rough, man. is absolutely rough. Good luck. That is a super difficult thing to do. You're listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. Thank you for listening, however you may be listening, whether you're listening online or on the TuneIn Radio app. Thank you for checking us out, giving us a listen. Well, we're talking about, it's Heisman season, it's bowl season, all of those things. And so we're talking about all of those things, but it's interesting because around bowl season, this is also like college football hiring season. So you've got all the coaches flying around everywhere, doing all of the different things that they do. And what's interesting about it is when you see all these other coaches flying around, you look at your own coaching situation and probably evaluate it a little bit more. The coach you just hired, the guy that's been coaching you for a little bit, and you start to wonder, like, could we do better? What would our team look like if at Tennessee they were to have a chance at a Tom Herman? Right? Like, nobody has more money than Texas. The pockets of oil money run very deep over there. So it's just probably not going to happen. But if you had your shot at a guy like that, or if Tennessee had their shot at a guy like a Willie Taggart, would you do it? Right? Like, say that Butch Jones' contract did not involve in any way a buyout of any kind. Like, you could just move on. And you saw those guys flying around. Would you keep Butch, or do you go after any of those guys? Are you satisfied with the guy that you have? And I think it makes for an interesting conversation. Because sports tend to be built around the hypothetical. Like, the conversations that you really can't prove, those are the ones that tend to be the most exciting. And this one is the hypothetical of, we've got a guy that we're already critical of frequently. We're critical of his staff. Shoop, we're critical of. The board, we're critical of. We're critical of Butch himself. And then you look at some of these other coaches and their resumes, and I'm going, like, Rule is a really good hire for Baylor. Why wouldn't he have been a good hire for the Vols if the Vols could get him? I don't know. I think it's fascinating. Why not a PJ Fleck if you could get it? Or even when you're looking around college football and going, wow, James Franklin was just up the road at Vandy. He gets to go to Penn State, fairly successful at Vandy. Like, the best seasons that school had in recent memory were with him, actually. Derek Mason, even though Derek Mason, I like him a lot and think that as a defensive coach, certainly Vanderbilt has never played better defense. You look at a guy like James Franklin going up to Penn State and going, well, if you had a chance to get a guy like that or have Butch Jones, do you keep Butch? And I just have this sinking feeling that even though my personal opinion in a lot of these situations is, you might want to try and hold on to Butch. The grass is greener situation. A lot of Tennessee fans today, I think a lot of Tennessee fans would go after a Willie Taggart. You get to choose between Butch Jones, Willie Taggart. Butch Jones, Matt Rule. Do you keep Butch? Or are you simply tired of everything that this guy's brought to the table? I think Vols fans feel like they don't want, like, nobody wants Butch Jones, like, fired, right? But if you could easily move in another direction, wouldn't you? Because it's one thing to say, okay, Butch has gone in, he's brought in all the people he's going to bring in, these are his guys, this is what this looks like. So it's hard to say, like, let's move on from Butch. But you've got a guy like Josh Dobbs He's graduating. Jalen Hurd is transferring away. What if, after that now, like a lot of the Butch Jones initial recruits, they're moving on, they're graduating, senior class, you could bring in another guy. Right? Because, like, this is the time when all of that stuff is supposed to be coming to fruition. This is what's so frustrating about this entire era. Now is the time when all of this stuff is supposed to come to fruition, and it just hasn't. 4 to 5 years. That's when you rebuild. And after like 5 years, that's when a rebuild ought to be finished. Right? Like, if you don't give a guy 5 years, well, maybe you just thought it was never going to happen, and maybe you jumped the gun a little bit on it. But if you give a guy 4 or 5 years, and year 4 looks like year 3, and year 3 looks a little better than year 2, isn't year 5 going to look a whole lot like year 4? We may have just reached the limits, possibly, of what it is that Butch Jones is actually capable of doing. And if you're a Vols fan, I can't imagine that is the happiest news on earth for you to hear, but it is probably the truth. It probably does not get better than this, right? Like, I'm interested in seeing what a future class of Butch Jones players looks like. Like, I want to see if this defense ever does shore up, if this secondary ever does get better, because it's been awful. If the offensive line gets any deeper, because the instant someone gets injured, you start playing musical chairs on the offensive line, and you're shuffling dudes around. You have absolutely no depth whatsoever, and it shows. If you didn't have a guy at quarterback with mobility, he'd be dead. Okay, I mean, how many times have you seen Josh Dobbs rolling out of the pocket to his right, running for his life? And either he runs and he picks up 2 or 3 yards, or he's throwing across his body off his back foot, which is where those interceptions feel like they always happen. Like, you're not supposed to do that, but when your offensive line never holds up for you, what else are you supposed to do? And that all comes down to the coach. Okay, I read a New York Times article that said coaching in college football is like your coach, your GM, and your president of football operations all rolled into one guy. Like, that's the level of importance. And it is that. The guy in charge of making sure you get your players, knowing what the design of the team is going to look like, hiring the coordinators. That's the coach. That's the coach's job. And it's been interesting to see, like, Tennessee hasn't gotten better at that part yet. You can get the talent, but somehow the talent is not seeming to fit, and it's not necessarily improving year after year after year, which is what makes this forward progress feel like it's going backwards. You've been listening to Clutch with Keon Rose. Remember, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. I'll see you in 24 hours. And don't forget to check me out on Twitter at SportsCloud is the handle. Have a good night.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Mark Truex Jr. is off the pace, and he is headed to the pit lane. Now